Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. We are back again with more Pillars of Eternity. I recently released my review of the game and mentioned that one of its strong points is the fantastic party members. In this video, I'm going to go deeper into why this group is so special and rank them in the order I like them the most. Feel free to comment down below with your personal list and let me know which party member is your favorite. Also, if there's any other content you are looking for regarding the game, just let me know. All the way at the bottom, number 11 is Kanarua. He is an island Amua chanter, and you must meet him as part of the main story. He is a scholar and has an inquisitive mind that shines through in all of his interactions. Kana is also a member of the Royal Deadfire Company, which doesn't mean much in this game, but is a significant faction in the sequel. Consequently, he can provide you with perspective on a completely different culture, and some of those conversations are very interesting. His chanter class essentially makes him a bard, and its implementation in the game is absolutely fantastic. From summoning to buffing or debuffing, Kana can be a strong addition to any team. Unfortunately, I am not a fan of his voice. He sounds nasally, and honestly, it annoys me. He has a ton of banter with different party members, but most of it is mediocre and forgettable. His side quest does give you some influence over his outlook, but it is also mediocre in my opinion, and the ending doesn't feel like a real accomplishment. Overall, once the game provides other options, I never use Kana again. Next at number 10 we have Maneha. She is a coastal Amua barbarian and can only be recruited if you have purchased the White March DLC. I like her constantly positive attitude and chipper voice to match. They both go perfectly with her portrait, which showcases Maneha wearing a soft smile along with her unique armor, which is an assortment of brass, animal teeth, and multiple fashions she's picked up from different areas. Great stuff, and I find myself smiling when I look at her portrait in preparation for her saying something positive or flat out hilarious. Pillars is a game where the best defense is a great offense, so having your tank be someone who can dish out pain is very useful, and I like having a barbarian on the squad. She has a lot of potential banter with your party members, significantly more than Zawa, who is also in the White March. She has interesting dialogue with Sagani, as they are both motivated by the past, but in completely different ways. These conversations are cool, but the really awesome exchanges are between her and Pallegina, who she clearly has a crush on. There's only one or two of these sequences, but they are hilarious. Unfortunately, most players will not enter the White March until around level 7, which makes her one of the last 3 party members you will recruit, and you'll almost certainly have an established team by the time she's picked up. Also, it's a long time before you can advance her personal story. Even though you recruit her in White March 1, she only has one personal quest and you cannot start it until White March 2, at which point you will probably be around level 14. This creates a significant delay before you really grow to understand this character, especially in comparison to other companion options. Also, to be honest, her quest is just okay to me. It's not all that compelling, especially considering how long you have to wait. Maneha is cool, but there are definitely stronger options. Next at number 9 we have Zawa. He is a Savannah human monk and also can only be recruited if you have purchased the White March DLC. There are several things I really like about the character, starting with the fact he is an old man and has a voice that matches perfectly with someone who has already learned many hard lessons. There's a grizzled, hardened warrior vibe about him that I really like having on the team. Despite this, his conversations are oftentimes unintentionally hilarious, and your first meeting with him is probably the most memorable party member recruitment sequence in the entire game. I am not a huge fan of how monks are implemented in Pillars of Eternity, but I do like the idea of the class in general, so it's a positive for me that Zawa is a monk. Out of all the party members, he has the most banter with Alath, and a couple of those exchanges are absolutely hilarious. Unfortunately, he shares some of the same issues as Maneha. You cannot recruit him until you start the White March, and there's a long delay before you can begin his personal story. Also, I find the ending of his personal quest to be depressing as all hell. Mind you, it's not sad in a way that doesn't make sense. It's a beautiful story, and he's had to learn some really hard lessons that shaped his character. But once the quest was finished, every time I saw his face, it just made me sad all over again, and I kept him on the bench. Hearing his description of the final conversation with the woman who should have been his wife was probably the most gut-wrenching moment of the game for me. At number 8, we have Sagani. She is a boreal dwarf ranger and comes with a fox companion. Meeting her is not required for the story, but she is sitting in an area you are very likely to pass, so you probably won't miss her. Sagani is from Nasatak, a place which doesn't factor heavily into the game, and so her stories tell you about a culture you otherwise don't hear a lot about. She is 57 years old and, similar to Zawa, provides a more mature perspective in the party that I really appreciate. I especially like her relationship with Kana Rua, whose constant inquisitiveness and sense of adventure is a sharp contrast to her more matter-of-fact personality. I also like her voice, even though I feel like it should sound a tad bit older considering her age and everything she has been through. Her personal quest is well written, but I am not a fan of it. The payoff is underwhelming, and while it's cool that the conversations help to shape her perspective, I find it all a little too mundane. Even more importantly, I don't like using her in combat. I mentioned in my review of the game that micromanagement is a big issue. Sagani makes that issue even worse because not only do you have to manage her, but her pet needs guidance as well. The pet going down negatively impacts Sagani, so you definitely don't want to just let it roam free. I find managing all the party members in combat irritating as it is, so adding a pet to the mix just makes things worse, and I only put Sagani on the team to finish up her personal quest. Number 7 is Huravias. He is a Heath Orland druid and his culture is Urglan Thoth. They play a big role in the game, so having him as a party member provides you with some degree of additional context. Meeting him is not required for the story, and the location where you recruit him is off to the side of the map, so he's easy to miss. I'm not a big nature guy, and consequently druids rarely appeal to me, but this is an exception because he can turn into a freaking werewolf during combat, which is fantastic to behold. I never invested heavily into his build, so Huravias always got shredded when doing this, but I am quite sure there's a way to make his shapeshifting viable, and the playthrough would have been a ton of fun. I also love his personal quest, which on some level centers around a struggle between whether to accept Whale or Galawain as his true deity. Deities are a fantastic part of Pillars of Eternity, and they are even more well developed in the sequel, so watching this struggle is great your first time around, but I found the conversations even more rewarding coming back to this game after having played the second one. He has plenty of banter and his dialogue is consistently funny. Unfortunately, they come off as arbitrary conversations and it doesn't feel like he develops an actual friendship with any of the party members. Also, while his personal quest is fascinating and I find his dialogue oftentimes humorous, I cannot say I'm a fan of him as a person. I think it might have to do with his voice, which isn't bad, but I feel like a different voice would fit this character better. Also, while I love his shapeshifting ability, I almost always have Pallegina and Eder on the team, and 3 frontliners felt like a crowd in narrow spaces. As I mentioned before, I don't particularly care for druids, so having him in the backline didn't make sense either, and consequently he rides the bench. At number 6 we have Olaf. Olaf is a wood elf wizard and recruiting him is a requirement in the story. It's hard to talk about what makes Olaf great without spoilers, but he is an extremely well written character and the more you peel back his layers the more interesting he becomes. His backstory, personal quest, and reasons for following you are all very well done. He also has lots of banter with your party members and all of them hate talking to him but love talking to his special friend at the same time, and it is hilarious. Trust me, it will make sense when you play the game. His exchanges with Eder are most especially fantastic. Wizards are very powerful in Pillars of Eternity, and you can build Olaf for debuffing, elemental damage, or martial damage with summoned weapons if that is your preference. Regardless, he will be a standout member of your team. In addition, there's a cool system where you can take grimoires from enemy spellcasters and use them to provide Olaf with new spells. Replaying a brutal fight against an ancient lich wizard over and over again game was completely worth it after I picked up his spellbook and deployed his most brutal spell against other foes. Olaf, Eder, and Olaf's special friend are all voiced by Matthew Mercer. For the most part, it works well, and they all sound distinctive. I don't particularly care for the visual design of Olaf's character. To me, he just looks like a typical elf. Also, for the vast majority of the game, he's a stick in the mud, which makes him great to play off other party members, but it doesn't really endear me to him. Other than that, Olaf is awesome, and he is a consistent member of my team. Next at number 5, we have the Devil of Karak. She is an advanced vessel rogue, essentially a construct, and this means her body armor is always her robot body, preventing you from equipping some of the awesome light armors that are available in the game. This is technically a drawback, but I am good with it because the limitation hammers home the state of her condition. Devil's Soul was forced into a construct by an evil animancer, and consequently, she feels nothing. Like Zawa and Manea, she is only recruitable if you have the White March DLC, and more than likely she will be the last party member you recruit. Unlike them, you do not have to wait until the White March Part 2 for advancement in her personal quest. That quest is fantastic, reveals multiple layers of her personality, and the way it's resolved deeply impacts her ending. For the record, how her quest ends can also impact whether or not you get a special armor in Pillars of Eternity 2. I knew this when I started my new playthrough and still screwed that up. Don't be like me. What I really love about this character is that she's flat out cruel and could care less about tearing people apart. Pillars of Eternity doesn't get heavy into alignments, so your party members for the most part don't care if you commit acts that would be considered evil, and they don't fall heavy into either end of the alignment spectrum. Devil's an exception to this, and is pretty clearly chaotic evil through and through. She gets plenty of banter with all your party members, but I most especially like her interactions with Kana and Eder. Kana seems to bring out a softer side of her, while conversations with Eder always seem to center around war and violence. Her voice is perfect for this character, and they've added a hollow sounding effect so that it sounds like it's coming from an empty robot. The problem with Devil of Karak is obviously you get her much later in the game, so it might be difficult to integrate her into the team. Also, she's a rogue, and I think the implementation of that class in the game is very vulnerable. Add that on top of not being able to give her specialized armor, and it can be a challenge to keep her alive. Of course, to mitigate that, you can give her a reach weapon, but that just feels weird to me since she's pretty obviously a slit your throat with a stiletto kind of gal. Coming up next at number 4, we have Pallegina. She is an avian godlike paladin, and while the story doesn't require you to recruit her, she is extremely difficult to miss. Godlikes are creatures that have been blessed, or depending on your perspective, cursed by a particular deity upon birth. Pallegina was, in her opinion, cursed by Hylia, the goddess of birds in the sky. This makes her, in my opinion, the most visually well-designed party member in the game. Jet black skin, yellow cat eyes, green and blue feathers growing amongst her hair, and the 5 suns shining on her breastplate. Her portrait communicates so much about who she is. Her voice is also absolutely perfect, conveying a woman who has been through so much and yet still is determined to persevere and carry herself with pride. Obsidian did an outstanding job of implementing paladins into this game, and Pallegina takes full advantage of the class. She can definitely serve as your main tank, even though I prefer to make her an off tank with Eder. This frees her up to focus more on Paladin's damaging abilities, some of which are centered around fire. Pallegina can serve as a competent healer, and she gets auras which can buff the entire team. She has lots of banter with your party members, and I especially like her interactions with Herodias. On some level, both of them were chosen by the gods without being given the opportunity to refuse their gift, and so it seems like she feels some kinship with them. As I mentioned before, her interactions with Manea are also quite humorous. There is some nice dialogue that occurs due to her personal quest, but overall I am not a fan of it. It is basically just a fetch quest with a couple of conversations, and I think she deserves something more fleshed out. Quick note before we get into my top 3 party members in the game. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate you subscribing and hitting the like button. This information tells me which content the community is enjoying and helps my videos spread to more people. I really appreciate all of the support. Number 3 on the list is Eder. He is a meta-human fighter, and you will meet him as part of the main story. Eder has a dry, matter-of-fact way of accepting the world that is hilarious from the first time you meet him. As I have already mentioned, his voice is fantastic for this character and instantly recognizable. Fighters work well as tanks, but keep in mind tanking isn't boring in Pillars of Eternity, and there's a lot of flexibility in how you build Eder up. Regardless of how you do it, he will be a pillar in your group, and there were many times while live streaming this game that the chat said Eder was pretty much carrying my whole team. He has a ton of banter with your party and might have the most reactivity overall in the game. I think it's most interesting pairing him with Herodias because their conversations reveal a layer of Eder's personality that doesn't really come out otherwise. This aspect of his character is extremely well written, and I found it fascinating to see this part of him explored. I am not a fan of his personal quest. The journey is just alright, and the culmination of it is absolutely a letdown. Otherwise, he is a fantastic character that is only kept out of the top 2 slots because those party members are so amazing. Number 2 is Durance. He is a meta-human priest of Magrin. It's not a requirement to recruit him, but Durance is extremely difficult to miss. If you take the entire Mass Effect series as a whole, I believe Garrus is the most well-written party member I've ever played with in a game. But if I was going to take just one game and rate a party member against any others, I believe Durance is the most well-written and interesting party member I have ever experienced. Every single time he opens his mouth, you feel something. It might be annoyance, it might be anger, it might be laughter, but it won't be indifference. Wicked smart, surprisingly insightful, delightfully cruel, and clutch your pearls foul-mouthed, Durance is absolutely unforgettable. His voice also marvelously conveys exactly what he is, a bitter, old, broken man. Priests are arguably the most powerful class in the game, and even if you had rolled one yourself, it might still be worth taking Durance. Since he worships Magrin, he can specialize in fire, which is a very potent element in Pillars of Eternity. Durance also has a ton of banter and reactivity in the game. While Eder probably has more lines, some of them are kind of throwaway, while Durance always brought my live chat to a halt. There's no specific party member relationship I can point out, because he hates everybody equally, and they all hate him. Regardless of who is around, the resulting conversations will be perceptive and hysterical. His personal quest is also the best in the game, revealing a significant amount of information regarding the Saints' War, deities, and his own personality in the process. Durance is definitely a person that you look at differently as the game goes on. If you are able to complete the quest and he sees you as a friend afterwards, it feels like a real accomplishment that was worth doing. While priests are awesome, Durance's attribute stats to use those priest abilities leave a lot to be desired. He has a 9 in dexterity, which means he will be slow to actually use the fantastic priest spells he has access to. Instead, the game gives him an 18 in resolve, which isn't necessarily worthless, but those points will be much more valuable in dexterity instead. This reinforces my previous point that it can be well worth your time to roll a priest, even if you plan to bring Durance along. Finally, all the way at the top of the mountain, we have reached Grieving Mother. She is a meta-human cipher. It's not required that you meet her, and honestly, she's a very easy party member to miss. That being said, her personal quest conveys more information about the despair people are experiencing due to the Hollowborn crisis than anything else you experience in the game. Birthing healthy children is her singular purpose in life, and the curse has absolutely torn her world apart. She has a quiet and withdrawn voice that's a great match for a woman who's barely holding herself together. She does have some reactivity, especially during conversations regarding children or Hollowborn. Despite this, Grieving Mother's mind is shattered to the point she's almost invisible to most people, and she has virtually no banter with party members. This creates a situation where your conversations with her truly feel like it's just the two of you in your own world, and there's an understanding you have with her that nobody else shares. There's also a sense of responsibility as you realize this person has been damaged in a way that's borderline irrevocable, and you might be the only person that can help her put the pieces of her life back together. This experience is even more powerful if you are also a cipher, as she has reactivity to that class. Ciphers are very well implemented in this game, and 2 of them are not a crowd. In fact, out of the 3 times I have played Pillars of Eternity, twice I rolled a cipher and still kept Grieving Mother in the party. The reason ciphers are so fantastic is you get so many ability options that you can switch up playstyles in the middle of combat based on what your party requires. Grieving Mother can be the buffer, debuffer, or damage dealer at any point in time and do them all exceptionally well. The main drawback is she's obviously not going to create the type of classic banter moments some of the other party members give you. Also, more than any other character, there's a strong sense that you should have been able to have a romance with her. I somewhat feel this way about Devil of Karak, but that's more just because I think she'd be a fantastic evil twin if I did a psychopath run. The relationship Grieving Mother develops with the Watcher feels deep and very emotional. Side note, and what might become my biggest gripe with the sequel, Grieving Mother is nowhere to be found in Pillars of Eternity 2. This means if you are planning to play both games, it might be more worth your time to focus on the party members who you know have stories that extend into the next game. Personally, as disappointing as it is to see them not continue with Grieving Mother, I do believe she provides the best party member experience in the first game. That completes my ranking of the Pillars of Eternity companions. Let me know in the comments down below what is your personal list and if there's any other content you want to see regarding the game. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like, share this content, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.